ठीक है, मे बी कल सवेर दे शो च गल करांगे, ठीक है, इन केस यू डू नॉट फाइंड आंसर। इट कुड बी गुरदास मान साहब, दूसरा तुसी नाम किहड़ा लिया?
हंसराज।
कुड बी हंसराज हंस भी हो सकते हैं, गुरदास मान साहब भी हो सकते हैं। आई एम नॉट सेइंग यस और नो, मैं इन्ना तुहानू हिंट देदा, दिस अ बिग हिंट, यू नो, ही इज दैट वो जिहड़ा बंदा है, ही इज अ सेलिब्रिटी एंड आई कुड लिसन टू दैट पर्सन फॉर आवर्स। सो मैनू आई वाज प्लेजेंटली सरप्राइज जदों सतिंदर सरताज ने इन वन ऑफ हिज इंटरव्यूज उन्होंने दस्सिया कि whenever मतलब मैनू मौका मिलता है तो मैं इन्हां दे नाल, और जिहड़ी तुसीं हुणे गल कीती ना, when both of them met for the first time, वो भी उन्होंने किस्सा दस्सिया, तो both very down to earth, क्योंकि दोनों accomplished है ना, spiritually, intellectually, सूफिज्म डिफरेंट लेवल ते है दोनों, ठीक है ना, सतिंदर सरताज और जिन्हां बारे मैं गल कर रहा सो जदों पहली बार भी दोनों मिले आपस दे विच, सो देयर वाज अ जबरदस्त कनैक्शन सी, उन्होंने बड़ी वधिया गल्लां कीतियां, बोथ वेरी डाउन टू अर्थ पर्सनैलिटीज़ एंड दोनों की खासियत है सतिंदर सरताज एंड दैट पर्सन यू कैन रिलेट टू दैम, तुसीं गलबात सुन सकते हो।
ओके
या और दोनों जने जिन्हां दी मैं गल कर रहा इंडिया दे विच तो काफ़ी फेमस ने।
ओके
हाँ, तो उन्होंने बड़ी रिसर्च है, बड़ी जबरदस्त।
ठीक, ये भी पंजाबी इंडस्ट्री तो बिलोंग करते हैं?
नहीं, मैं हिंट मैं वो हिंदी दा, वो कोई भी हो सकता है।
ओके,
वो कोई भी हो सकता है।
ओके,
तो कोई भी हो सकता है। सतिंदर सरताज मैं ऐसा तो नहीं कहूँगा कि, पर उन्होंने तो सीखते हैं काफ़ी कुछ, हो काफ़ी कुछ सीखते हैं। चलो तुसी फाइंड आउट करना, और कल सवेरे मॉर्निंग शो वाई मीडिया लाइव शो ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ। ਇਨ ਕੇਸ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫਾਈਂਡ ਆਊਟ ਕਰ ਸਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਨਸਰਸ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ, ਠੀਕ ਹੈ। ਕੱਲ ਸਵੇਰੇ ਦੇ ਮਾਰਨਿੰਗ ਸ਼ੋ 'ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਵਾਈ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਲਾਈਵ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਔਰ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਆਨਸਰ ਸੁਣਾਂਗਾ ਐਂਡ ਆਈ ਵਿਲ ਪਲੇ ਅ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਆਲਸੋ, ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੀ।
ਓਕੇ,
ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਪਲੇ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ, ਠੀਕ ਹੈ। ਡਨ, ਕੱਲ ਤੱਕ सर्च इन गूगल जिथे मर्जी सर्च कर लो, ठीक है। सो कल ये गल होएगी, ठीक है। चलो ऑल दी बेस्ट फॉर दैट। सतिंदर का साडा गाना जरूर प्ले कर देना, ठीक है, थैंक यू, ओके, वेलकम। तो असी रुक करते हैं जी सीधा साडे जिहड़े इंपॉर्टेंट इशूज़ ने। विल स्टार्ट विद वाई मीडिया फॉरेन पॉलिसी रिपोर्ट। At Why Media Foreign Policy Report, we have a very important issue. I'll discuss the issue and I'll let Ramona ji give her viewpoints on that one. As we all know, 10 a.m. was the deadline. 10 a.m. was the deadline from New York and Toronto time. Monday morning 10 a.m. the blockade will be executed. That's what President Trump said. The blockade has been executed. It's a US warship, Abraham Lincoln. It's a nuclear powered warship. It's a massive warship. I don't want to go into too much details in the interest of time because we had lots to discuss. Trump has clearly said this. Trump says any Iranian warship or anything else coming close to this will be eliminated. And here we are, is the first time that this US warship is just approximately 200 kilometers from the southern border of Iran. So that's very close now. It's the first time they're getting this close now. So two blockades for now. There are two blockades. One, Iran, it still has the control of Strait of Hormuz. Iran is pitching in that maybe $1 per barrel pays through cryptocurrency. We're hearing news about this. The oil producers, they're saying that's not too much of a cost as long as you guarantee a safety, especially in this sort of conditions. But this is definitely not acceptable to US, because as much as they can say that the nuclear weapon is the major issue, but precisely that's not an issue, because Iran, even with its enrichment, they're just 60% of the uranium enrichment they've done. It's not actually a nuclear grade enrichment that they are doing right now. So the major issue was control of the Strait of Hormuz. So now US cannot say we didn't get this control of Strait of Hormuz. Iran is not agreeing to that. That'll, you know, they look quite weak in that. So that's why they're talking about the nuclear weapon issue, but actually it's the control on the Strait of Hormuz. So here they've come up with this new idea. We'll also set our own blockade. So they are setting their own blockade. Iran is clearly warning any foreign intervention, it will escalate the crisis. I think the crisis has already escalated. We are feeling the pinch right across the globe. 40, 50, up to 70% more charge on the power that countries are producing from South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, India, Pakistan, Brazil, Argentina. We're feeling the pinch in US, Canada, Ireland, Italy. In Europe, Italy is devastated. You're feeling this in England as well. So right across the globe, we are feeling the pressure. There is inflation. So all these inflationary challenges that common Canadians, Europeans, Americans, anybody in Asia, they're all feeling that. So where will this lead? There is no set date for any further discussions. Pakistan's Prime Minister has said they are still continuing with their efforts, but with Pakistan sending military to Saudi Arabia, Pakistan sending warplanes to Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of discussion. Is it a neutral player? Even many of the Pakistani analysts, they're discussing this. Are we any more neutral? Because just, at the command of Saudi Arabia, they will have to fight against Iran. That's why they've already sent their soldiers there. Their fighter jets are already now in Saudi Arabia's airbase. Ramona ji, your comments, your take on all the current situation in Middle East, and we'll talk about the political Sensex later on. Please go ahead.
Sure. We covered what took place yesterday with the talks between United States and Iran in Pakistan, and Vice President J.D. Vance said it was failed talks after 20 plus hours of going over the 10 points. That was essentially the points that was for the ceasefire that was agreed by as negotiable terms by the president. That was April 7th, if you recall. And, it begs the question, because optics do matter in all of this. While you had, Vice President J.D. Vance, who's been pretty much MIA for the 6 weeks of this war that's been taking place. We know that what's come out of the Situation Room and previously to what Vice President J.D. Vance had said is that he was against going to war with Iran. And then it's been claimed that in the Situation Room, he said he was against it, but, we'll support the president if he chooses to go ahead, which was right before that February 28th bombing that started this war by the Israeli and the American forces on Iran, assassinating the Ayatollah and the high figures in the regime. So now it begs the question when it comes to the optics that now you had Vice President J.D. Vance appear really out of nowhere in this, right, to lead the talks. And then while you had President Trump and, Secretary of State Marco Rubio smiling at a UFC fight in Florida, in Miami. So, this is serious conversation, serious escalation point that the whole world, and more specifically when it comes to GCC countries who've been attacked by Iran for the U.S. naval base, military bases, have been held hostage. The other countries who rely on the oil and fertilizer that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz, have been going through devastations, going through their stockpiles and everything else in between. And then yet you have the president and Marco Rubio, who is the top official on foreign affairs. Marco Rubio really should have been at that meeting in Pakistan, but yet they're having a great time smiling at a UFC fight. And then we've heard about reports how the goalpost again in that meeting was changed, from saying that it went from, of course, Iran should not have nuclear weapons. That's been a stance, I think, for the longest time with all the administrations, to now, zero enrichment of uranium, even for, the civil use that they would have, which was never, part of any sort of position that the United States ever took. So that was a very hard line. So almost making it impossible to come to some sort of terms with Iran, because the goalpost again changed during these meetings. And then, then what you saw them having a good time at a match. And then, of course, President Trump then picked a fight with the Pope. And so it's just very chaotic. And now if the main point, since it was regime change on February 28th, that changed to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the goal of opening up the Strait of Hormuz, it being an issue, now you're going to even block it further. And I can explain perhaps what the United States is thinking about blocking the Strait of Hormuz when it comes to Iran and Iranian shipments. But now it's like the double blockage. Now Iran said, as of yesterday, said, yeah, the Strait of Hormuz is open for any civilian vessels, no military. And now the United States is saying, no, we're going to come and block it. So to open up a blockage, it seems like that was successful because Iran has said they're opening it and it's open, but now the United States wants to block it. So it's very confusing to understand that does this president want to have, proper ceasefire and negotiate end of war terms, or does he want to escalate things with not only what he posts on Truth Social, but also these military actions that are taking place, and also really throwing the vice president, JD Vance, under the bus, setting him up for talks that are not going to be met if he's, had his non-negotiables to his vice president. So a couple of those things, it's just, it doesn't fare well for diplomacy is what the world is asking this president of.
What do you think, Iran and US, do you think they'll come back on the table once again? Because my big question, I still hope they'll come back to the discussion table. And I was expecting some sort of hint from US. So US is hinting that yes, they could have a discussion, but it's more, with due respect, I'm saying, it's more of a threats from US. That's what we are listening. I mean, President Trump is continuing his threats regarding Iran. We can take Iran down in a day. I was listening to the interview of President Trump on Sunday on Fox News. So there are more sorts of threats, and they have escalated because they have set up a blockade. On the Iranian side, as much as they are threatening back as well, they said, we're willing to fight back, but from the parliamentary speaker to foreign minister to the president, they're all saying, deal is not off the limits. We could still have a deal. Pakistan is trying its best. So what do you think? Will the discussions resume or no?
Well, that's the point I was just making, is that it appears that it's trying to go for escalation from the United States part, because going from no enrichment of uranium for Iran is a very hard line, which Iran is not going to agree on, because prior to that, if you recall, under the deal they made with Obama, it was supposed to be at 3.6, under the JCPOA. And then when Trump tore up that entire agreement, then Iran went up to 20 to 60. When it comes to enriching their uranium. Essentially, there was always the ability to enrich it for civilian purposes. And now this president is saying no enrichment of uranium. So there you already have no terms. And then we know on the 10-point ceasefire points that Iran had put forward, that President Trump said on his Truth Social that are negotiable, was Lebanon, the strikes on Lebanon should also have a ceasefire there by Israeli forces. And we know that was never, done. And that's been an escalatory point as well. So it appears that the U.S. does not want to have any sort of diplomacy, because when Iran says the Strait of Hormuz is open for civilian vessels, then, which was the goal of this president, right, was to open up the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran has agreed to, but now the U.S. is coming to block it. So with those actions and those words, clearly it's not setting the stage for further negotiations. If anything, it's making a fragile ceasefire even more fragile, that could break at any point. And we already saw the market has already reacted to it with crude oil, above $100 a barrel. And so, and then now you have the UK and France are trying to have talks in terms of diplomacy, trying to step up now. So I think